Good afternoon. If I may interrupt lots of lively sounding conversations, I'm Jim Kalaki. I'm here on behalf of the FURL work group to welcome you to what is actually the first session of the last FURL class for this semester. I will put in my usual pitch that we have, we're working feverishly, almost, on the spring semester. We've got close to we'll be up to about another dozen courses by the time we get to early spring. If you know of a course you'd like to have, or if you know of someone who you think would like to teach a course, or if you would like to teach a course, please be in touch with anyone on the FURL group and we'll take it from there. When Wiz mentioned, where is Wiz? Oh,
I'm right here.
Oh, he didn't run away, good.
I haven't run away yet.
That he was interested in doing a session on the U.S. National Arboretum. I thought, what a gift to River Landing in a long line of gifts that Wiz has offered through amazing public service since he's been here. I won't prolong this any longer except to thank you for coming, and Wiz, thank you for coming and bringing what you're bringing this afternoon. I know we're going to have a great time, so welcome.
Thank you. I wrote all of that out for Jim, and he got almost all of it right. Very good. Okay, the U.S. National Arboretum, where science meets beauty. That's sort of the motto there. It's probably not the official motto, but I think it says a lot for the National Arboretum. Full disclosure, I am not a scientist. I don't know a heck of a lot about plants. All you got to do is look in my backyard. You'd be able to tell that. But the place really does an awful lot in the way of science to make our world much more beautiful. Okay, where is the National Arboretum located? Got to go through my government stuff here, so give me a couple of minutes, please. We're located under the United States Department of Agriculture, which is one of the largest agencies in the federal government. And within the USDA, there are a number of smaller agencies. Agricultural Research Service is broken down into 6 areas. The Beltsville area, which is in Beltsville, Maryland, which is only about 20 minutes up the road from the National Arboretum that's in Washington. So that's where the Arboretum is tucked into, is within the Agricultural Research Service. Dr. Richard Olson is the current director there. And a little bit about what the mission is. It conducts wide-ranging development and applied research on trees, shrubs, turf, and floral plants. I'm not going to talk about turf here. Nothing more boring than talking about grass growing. So we are going to be talking about some flowers. Public gardens are provided and collections that educate and exhibit research results. We maintain a herbarium there, and we publish research results, release plant introductions, and participate in cooperative agreements, which Jim is very familiar with because I know in his work that he's been involved with cooperative agreements with the Department of Agriculture. A little bit about the Arboretum. Was established in 1927 by an act of Congress. Calvin Coolidge did that. Cal never did much, but that's one good thing that he did do. It is located in Washington, D.C. It's 446 acres. That's just a little bit more than twice the size of the campus of River Landing. So it'll give you some idea of the size of the National Arboretum. 10 miles of winding roadways bordered by New York Avenue, Bladensburg Road, and the Anacostia River. It's really neat that it butts right up to the Anacostia River because that gives us a lot of special things at the Arboretum. 650,000 annual visitors, not so much last year because quite a bit of it was shut down. But usually we'll have anywhere between 650, 700,000 visitors a year. And it's free, so that helps also. And you get all kinds of visitors there. You got everything from the president and the first ladies to cabinet secretaries who bring out special visitors from foreign countries and so forth. When people are looking for a neat place to go in Washington, D.C., and a beautiful place to go, many times they end up at the Arboretum. A staff of 71, and if we didn't have the 100+ volunteers that we have there, it would never work. 71 people is just not enough to keep up the gardens and collections, the roads, security, maintenance, and everything else that has to be done. So thank goodness we've got the volunteers. The budget, approximately $12 million. You say $12 million, that's an awful lot of money. Well, it is, not when you're talking about trillions, which a lot of people are talking about these days, but $12 million takes care of basically the basic things there. Luckily, there is outside money that comes in through, down at the bottom down there, the Friends of the National Arboretum, which was set up by Congress back in the early 80s so that people and organizations that want to donate money to the Arboretum to support particular gardens and collections that they have interest in, they can go through the Friends of the National Arboretum, put money in that way, and then the Arboretum can use that money to support. Over 100 scientific publications in the last 3 years. The scientists there must publish. It's like anywhere else. As a scientist must publish, and that's how they move up within the grade structure of the federal government. 800,000 plant specimens in the herbarium. The herbarium actually is preserved plant specimens, not just from within the United States, but from around the world also. And people who are in the horticultural business as well as scholars come there to study what the plants look like, not only the ones that we have there that are current, but ones that may have been around in the world many, many years ago. Okay, so how does a guy who's got a human resources background end up in a scientific organization? This guy, Dr. Mark Cathy, was a director there from the early 80s into about 1993, 94 or so, something like that. And he was born in Statesville, North Carolina. A brilliant guy when it came to floral and nursery crops. He headed up a laboratory out at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, which I said is just up the road from the Arboretum. And when he became the director of the Arboretum, he was really in his element because he was excellent in PR. He loved to get out and sell, and the ladies loved this guy. And he would find out when the various and sundry people in the cabinet came in, Mark would find out who the wives were, because these are mostly men coming into these cabinet positions. He would find out who the wives were. He would find out where they were. He would invite them out to the Arboretum, take them to lunch and so forth, get them involved in a committee, and the next thing you know, we've got all sorts of extra help, most of which was really good for us. Mark was doing such a good job at PR and so forth. Quite frankly, some of the things back on the farm at the Arboretum were maybe slipping a little bit. So they decided, Mark's bosses decided that they needed to have somebody else on site to be able to sort of take care of the stuff on a day-to-day basis while Mark was out selling the Arboretum. So they advertised a position for administrative and facilities manager. A couple of people said, Wiz, you're an HR guy. You should be able to do that. So I applied for it, ended up getting the job, and worked there for 2 years, 1987, 88, and 89. The title was administrative and facilities manager. And after a couple of months, Mark started introducing me as the assistant director. Well, that sounded nice, but I didn't know plant from a weed for the most part. So when he would have his meetings there and all of these floral and nursery crops people would come in and he would introduce me as the assistant director, they'd get me aside and say, you know, I'm having trouble with my roses and I need to get this done, or what kind of fertilizer should I be using? So I would stay close to a scientist or one of the people who were in charge of one of the gardens and shuttle them off to that individual, and I would disappear. One of the concerns that I had about going to work there was that I'd have to go into Washington, D.C., and I wasn't particularly interested in that. All of the kind of ugly buildings there, the traffic and all this other stuff. But I found out when I got there that it really wasn't too bad. This was the building that I was working in. Tough. I had a nice office there at the Arboretum. Had a nice office that looked out over a nice pond full of aquatic plants and Japanese koi fish, 150,000 gallons pond right outside the window. And if I got tired of that, if the sun was shining on, you know, it was hurting my eyes and so forth, then I'd just walk across the hall and, you know, have a little bit of different scenery to take a look at. Okay, we're going to be going through some of the gardens and collections, taking a quick look at those. We couldn't go through them all today, but the ones that I want to spend a little bit of time on are the Asian collection, the Azalea Collection, because that's really what the Arboretum is really known for. Fern Valley, Gatelli Conifer Collection, Holly and Magnolia Collection, the National Bonsai and Pinjing Museum, and the National Boxwood Collection, the National Capitol Columns, and also the National Herb Garden. Okay, the first on the Asian collections. From the top of Hickey Hill to the floodplain down to the Anacostia River, it's some of the most dramatic views and so forth that we have at the Arboretum. Many of these plants were collected in the wild by the Asian Valley curators and the folks who would go over into Asia every year and collect plants there. There are three basic sections over there. This is a shot of the pagoda that leads down into China Valley. And this particular pagoda was dedicated to the memory of Mrs. Dorothy Kidder. And I'll have a little bit story about Mrs. Kidder in a couple of minutes. This is the Upper Valley overlook in China, in Asia Valley. Most of the plants in Asia Valley began collected during the 1970s and 80s. And of course, if you're in that type of area, you would see usually a little stream running down, all the way down to the Anacostia. And that obviously is a fall picture there. This is the Japanese woodland in the spring. And I talked about the paths and so forth. There's probably 40 or 50 miles of paths at the Arboretum. Got to be that many. I don't think I ever walked all of them, but there are just paths all over the place, which really makes it nice for you to kind of get yourself lost if you want to. And of course, it being an Asian motif in that valley, you have to have an Asian type of lamp there. Another picture in Asian Valley. There was a cooling period on the earth back millions of years ago. Yes, there was cooling. I know we're burning up now, but it was a cooling period back at that time. And a number of the flora that was in the northern hemisphere sort of disappeared. But as it warmed up and got a little bit better, it turned out that some of the flora that wasn't making it during the cool period managed to expand and get itself back into the northern hemisphere of the world. This is a picture in the fall of, that's the Korean hillside right there. This is the Katasura tree. Anybody ever heard of a Katasura tree? It's a Japanese tree, and if you get up close to it, you can smell it, and it smells like cotton candy. It's like being at the fair. In addition to what's going on in Asian Valley from the Near East, there is also a great collection of camellias there. And many of these camellias were developed at the Arboretum. So let's take a look at some of the camellias that are there. This one is called Accent, A-C-K-S-C-E-N-T. And I have a feeling Dr. Ackerman, who developed that, named that a little bit after himself. This is Beni Argis, beautiful white camellia. This is a tricolor white. This one's got a neat name. It's Our Linda. And you know what Linda means in Spanish? Beautiful, lovely. This is Winter's Beauty. This is Winter's Fire. This almost looks like a rose. It's Winter's Peony. Asian collection is really quite nice. I mentioned Dorothy Kidder and this pagoda. I had been on the job about 2 weeks when I got a phone call, and it was Mrs. Kidder calling. Now, I'd heard about Mrs. Kidder. She was a very high up in Washington, D.C. society. She loved the Arboretum. She had a lot of money and a lot of connections in D.C. So I got on the phone with her, and she said, are you the new man there? I said, yes, ma'am, I'm the new man here. And she said, we need to talk. I said, yes, ma'am. Silence. And she says, we need to talk in person. Yes, ma'am. I said, I'm here all afternoon, or if you want to come out tomorrow, I'll be here all day tomorrow. I'll be glad to, whenever you'd like to come out. Silence. She said, you will come to see me. Yes, ma'am. So we made an appointment for the next day, and she said, oh, and by the way, we will have tea. Ooh, going to have tea. So the next morning, I got up, put on my best J.C. Penney suit, and drove my '82 Honda Civic over there to her place of business, or not her place of business, where she lived, which happened to be. Anybody recognize what that is? That's the Watergate, absolutely. Richard Nixon's fame. I looked up just to see what the price range was over there now. And you can get a little small 2-bedroom condo there for about $6.5 million with a $2,000 a month fee, just so to keep the elevator operating, I guess, or something over there. So at any rate, I got over there, I went in, the concierge was there, and I said, I'm Mr. Horner. She said, yes, Mrs. Kidder is waiting to see you. I said, okay, fine, very good. She said, go on down the hall and the last elevator on the left. I said, okay, I figured that out. I got down there, stood in front of the elevator, no button to push. Uh-oh. And then the doors open. Step in, nice elevator, mirrors all around, little bench in the back. It's very, very comfortable looking. Doors closed, no buttons to push, door closed. Up we go. Stops, opens, 16th floor. That's what this place has, is 16 floors. So I step out, and big long hallway, curved hallway, and there's only a couple of doors that I can see there, but one of them has a little, a maid standing there. I could tell it was a maid because she had the little maid outfit on. And Mr. Horner said, yes, come in. So she ushered me into the foyer of the condo. Foyer is about the size of Liz and I's first apartment, I think, that we lived in after we got married. And she said, Mrs. Kidder will be with you shortly. And she opened these doors, and I walked into this magnificent room with paintings on the wall, a grand piano, great furniture and so forth, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac River and the Kennedy Center on the other side. Wow, holy mackerel. Anyway, Mrs. Kidder came in. We had a very nice discussion. We had tea. And when I got back, went in and told Dr. Kathy, I said, I want you to know that I had tea with, with Mrs. Kidder. It turns out that he and Mrs. Kidder did not get along well. So Mrs. Kidder was looking for somebody that she could talk to and work with as she was giving out her money and so forth at the National Arboretum. So I guess I kind of fit that bill for him. And he said, that's fine. He said, that's great. He said, you just let me know when she's coming out here. You talk to her and I'll disappear. So that worked out great. Next thing we're going to take a look at is the National Herb Garden. The National Herb Garden is the largest designed herb garden in the United States. There are 800 herbs from around the world in showcase plants that enhance people's lives as flavorings, fragrances, medicines, coloring agents, and additives in industrial products from around the world. There's some theme gardens there and some seasonal displays for education and aesthetic enjoyment. The herb garden began as a gift from the Herb Society of America in the early 1980s. Now, I know Ann Burke is a member of the National Herb Society of America. Anyone else in here a member of that organization? Well, it's a great organization, raised an awful lot of money for the Arboretum, and they really got this herb garden started there at the Arboretum, which is really a beautiful garden. This is the Knot Garden, K-N-O-T. It's in the shape of I wish I had an overhead shot of that. It would really be neat. But it's in the shape sort of like a figure 8 with herbs and so forth entwined into some of the smaller evergreens there. It's sort of an Elizabethan era type of garden. You can see the Capitol columns in the background, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes. Next is the entrance garden. This is part of the entrance garden there, and these are all herbs and so forth planted around it. They have species gardens there, and this is one of the rose garden. And we have 100 species of roses in that garden. Another picture of the rose garden. And then there's some theme gardens there also, and the herbs are organized in 10 categories to illustrate how plants are important in many aspects of human lives. You will find everything from lavender to rosemary to chili peppers. There's something for everybody there. And the neat thing about this garden is there's signage for every one of those herbs there, so that if you don't know what an herb is, it tells you what it is and what it's used for, either industrially or for food or whatever it might happen to be. Here's a couple of border plantings. This is salvia used as a border. That's basil used as a border. Now, I don't know where you get your basil around here. I get mine from Mary Gerald back there, who lives down the street from me. I probably shouldn't advertise that. You'll be over there beating on her door trying to get some basil. And I mentioned chili peppers. Chili peppers there. And if you've got chili peppers, and I know John Scroggins loves chili. I'm brought up in West Texas, so you know he likes hot, spicy food. And of course, if you had chili peppers, then you got to have something to wash that down with. So here's another garden there. It's a beer garden. Now, you can't actually get beer there, but it does tell you all of the things that are used in many different kinds of beers and so forth. And there's a shot of the herb garden in the fall. Okay, next, Fern Valley. If you're looking for a place to explore Native American plants, Fern Valley is a place where you'd really want to spend some time. least a couple of hours there. There are many paths that sort of weave its way up and down the hills there. This is one of the paths with some fall colors. You're going to see spring woodland wildflowers to prairie plants. In addition to plants native to the Washington, D.C. area, you'll see some prairie plants native to the western edges of the eastern United States forest, plants of the sandy flat coastal plains, and in the southeastern United States and trees, some shrubs and woodland flowers of New England. This is summer sweet plant. This one will knock your eyes out. That's a strawberry bush. Now, you won't be able to eat a strawberry off of that, but it's called a strawberry bush for obvious reasons. The entire Valley collection is organized by habitat and geography to give you a feel of the different regions of the eastern United States, from a sunny prairie to a meadow and northern forest, and it's loaded with hemlocks and sugar maples and many plants. There is, anybody know what that is? Hepatica. Hepatica. There's a little small stream. There's places loaded with streams there, which is really neat. A nice little stream that runs down through Fern Valley. And the neat thing about Fern Valley is there's always something blooming, and when you've got plants blooming, what have you got? You got a bumblebee. That's right. When all of the tulip trees, the oaks, and the beeches are leafing out and the shade starts to come into Fern Valley, the ferns come out. And the whole floor of that whole valley, acres and acres, is just full of these ferns. And you get the least little breeze in there, down low, and they're just all kind of moving around. It's really something to be walking around in there. This is the American beauty berry. This is an interesting looking flower. It looks like somebody came through and picked a couple of petals off of it or something. But if you get close to it, it lives up to its name. It's called a sneeze weed. And you will sneeze if you get up close. This is a New England asta. Did I say that right, Bill? New England asta? No, it's not an aster, it's an asta. Asta. Okay, I want to be sure I got that right. And of course, we have a lot of wild geraniums there. We got a lot of tame geraniums here that you see. And this is some of the wild geraniums that they are there in Fern Valley. It's a great place to visit, a nice, quiet, cool place to walk in the shade. You can hear the stream running. It's just like no other place. Okay, next is the Azalea Collection. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one now. Every spring, the tourists come to Washington, D.C. to see the cherry blossoms. And they're down around the reflection pool in the tidal basin, and they're beautiful. There's no doubt about that. The cherry blossoms are actually beautiful in Washington. But the trouble is, they only last for a week or two, and if the weather gets bad or you get a little breeze or a little rain, boom, they're gone. What many folks miss is what I would call an avalanche of color out at the Arboretum for the Azalea Collection. And it's only about 20 minutes from where you would be seeing the cherry blossom festivals. And of course, the azaleas bloom from the early spring and into the summer, so you've got months of beauty there. That's for me. Tell them I'm busy. This is a path in the Azalea Collection, and there are literally thousands of azalea plants that bloom on the hillside of Mount Hamilton at the Arboretum. And Mount Hamilton, another interesting thing about Mount Hamilton, it's the highest natural point in Washington, D.C. It's a strapping 245 feet above sea level. or it's really above swamp level, because you know DC was built on a swamp. You know, people do talk about draining that swamp, so. I'll tell you a little bit more about Mount Hamilton in a few minutes. The first warm days of spring bring out the flowers, and the slopes take on a surreal, luminescent glow. I picked that up for one of the things that was said in the website, but quite frankly, having spent a couple of years there during when the azaleas were blooming, you could go out and stand in the middle of, on the hillside of Mount Hamilton, and stand in the middle of the azaleas and just stand there and look, and then just turn around, do 360 degrees, and it was almost like standing in the middle of a Monet painting. It was just all of those colors just sort of washed over you. It was just absolutely amazing. These are some of the Glendale azaleas. This is the azalea by Tatum, and it was developed by Dr. Morrison, who was one of the directors at the Arboretum, and he developed this beautiful purple and white azalea. It's the Azalea festiva. I don't know how that red one got in there, but it snuck in there somehow or other. And what they would do is they would blend the large flowers and the vivid colors of the southern group with the hardiness of the northern species, and that's where they would come up with something that had sort of the look of both. Isn't that something? We've got a number of azaleas here on campus, but I don't think I've ever seen one like that. It's a shot of the Morrison Garden itself. This is the azalea red tip. Got a white center and the tips of the petals red. This is the red azalea trail. If you're looking for a particular color of azalea, whether it's red or pink or white or purple or whatever it is, then you can find an area where there is just that color planted of the azaleas. So if you want to look for something, okay, I think I want to get a red, but I'm not quite sure what, then you go there, look at that, see what you can get. The signage is there and tells you exactly what to look for. It's a shot from the azalea thing looking out over the field there. Found a short video, runs about 4 minutes or so, of someone walking through the Azalea Collection. The guy has a very interesting voice, but don't be dissuaded from watching the pictures. Brian?
Every spring, the U.S. National Arboretum welcomes visitors to view its azalea collections. Thousands of azaleas covering the flanks of Mount Hamilton in a set of blazing colors. On the various flanks of Mount Hamilton, the Glendale hillside is perhaps the most spectacular in terms of its display and variety of azaleas blooming within a short time period. This planting, located on the south slope of Mount Hamilton, sprang from the breeding work of former Arboretum director Benjamin Morrison. Morrison envisioned a modern hybrid azalea as we know it today. He successfully married the large flowers and exciting colors of the tender azaleas in the southern Indian group with the hardiness of the northern species. Many, if not all, the plants have labels. You might be surprised to know that all azaleas are rhododendrons, but not all rhododendrons are azaleas. Most azaleas are deciduous, but the true rhododendrons are usually evergreens. Azaleas have a funnel-shaped flowers, and rhodi flowers tend to be bell-shaped. The Arboretum maintains an extensive interactive website that allows you to identify each plant within the Azalea Collection, as well as throughout the 446 acres of the facility. Serving as a hub to unify the Glendale azalea hybrids is a walled Morrison garden. This garden was completed in 1952 using 31,500 bricks salvaged from a schoolhouse located in what is now the Boxwood Collection, within the grounds of the present-day Arboretum. The best way to see this collection is on foot. A network of rustic woodland trails follows the contours of Mount Hamilton and allows you to view the blossoms at close range. Benches are placed throughout the pathways for you to sit and enjoy the blossoms. Planning a visit to the Arboretum at peak bloom can be challenging, since peak bloom can vary by 2 weeks or more, depending on the weather, but usually takes place around the end of April. This video was made on a visit on April 22nd. Fortunately, many azaleas are in bloom long after the peak. There are usually some azaleas in bloom from early April until well into June.
That'll give you a rough idea of what it's like to walk through there. I mentioned something about Mount Hamilton being the highest point there. I had an interesting experience there. I'd been there, 4 or 5 months or so. And there's a winding road that goes up to the top of Mount Hamilton, but we normally had a chain across it because we did not want any visitors to drive up there. The road it was too narrow and windy, and we were just concerned about there could be some problems and so forth. So one day I was out walking, and the chain was down. So I went over there and I thought, well, okay, maybe it was one of my maintenance guys or security had gone up there or something like that. So I put the chain back up and I decided to walk up myself, and I did. And as I got up to the top of Mount Hamilton and turned around the corner, I saw a car there and 2 men. One was up on a stepladder looking through binoculars. And the other guy was standing there with a camera with a long lens on it. And they were both armed. They both had pistols. Well, at the same time, they saw me, I saw them, and the three of us said, "Who are you?" Well, they had guns, so I figured I'd go first. So I told them who I was, and they seemed to relax a little bit. They showed me their credentials. Turned out they were FBI agents. And there's a direct line of sight from the top of Mount Hamilton west directly to the Capitol building. Well, I figured, why in the heck are they up there with the FBI looking in on the Capitol building? Well, there's another building between the top of Mount Hamilton and the Capitol building and that was the Russian embassy. So they weren't looking at the Capitol, I don't think. They didn't tell me what they were looking at, but I think they were looking at the Russian embassy. Holly and Magnolia Collection. This collection features stunning displays of red-berried evergreen hollies, which we associate with winter holidays, and fragrant southern magnolias. There are numerous other evergreens and deciduous hollies and magnolias that are great to view in all seasons, but particularly beautiful in the spring, and again in the fall and in the winter. And in the autumn, you will find hundreds of hollies that are ripe with their berries. So let's look at some of the hollies now. This is the trail down through some of the hollies. The scientists at the Arboretum have worked really hard to develop some good hardy hollies. And that's one of them. That's called cherry balm, and it's basically a bush. This is golden Fosters. And actually, that's a pretty good sized tree. Sunny Fosters. And there you see some cream-colored and green leaves on that particular holly. Ruby holly. I think that's what we have a lot of here. At least I've got 3 or 4 and behind our cottage that look an awful lot like this. I think that may be what they are. This is winterberry. That will wake you up in the morning. And that one's called red stripe. Let's take a look at a few magnolias. This is southern praecox magnolia. This is southern Baldwin. Interesting cone shape there that the berries come from. This one is called Randy. It was named after Brian's father. Is that right, Brian? Yeah, right. His father's name is Brian. Okay. This is forest pink, white with some pink in it. Sweet Bay. I really like that picture because it shows one just in the process of opening and one that's been open for a while and starting to fade a little bit. And this one was developed at the Arboretum, and it's called Nimbus. I did mention that there are a lot of visitors and so forth that come to the Arboretum, and a lot of them are folks that are sort of high up in the strata of Washington, D.C., shall we say, presidents, vice presidents, cabinet folks, and so forth. And I got a great picture here of the president and the first lady. These eagles have been there, I think were first spotted there about in 2015. So they've been there for 5 or 6 years or so, something like that. I don't know which is the president, which is the first lady. John, do you know? Can you tell from looking? You can't. John can't tell either. Okay. But there is a great live 24-hour-a-day cam that's on these birds. I looked at it when I was preparing for this for hours and hours. I never saw anything happening. I could hear a lot of the things going on in the forest and so forth there at the Arboretum, but I never saw any birds. At any rate, this nice couple occasionally had chicks. And of course, the names of the chicks, since it's President and the First Lady, is Freedom and Liberty. It's the 2 chicks' names. And this shot is, I just thought was a great shot of the eagle getting ready to land on the nest. Beautiful, beautiful bird. We've had eagles there off and on for years and years. It just seems to be a good natural habitat for them. The Anacostia River is not too far away where they can do some hunting and so forth there. At any rate, I thought you'd be interested in seeing some of the visitors that we've got there. And those last pictures are a paid commercial for the River Landing Bird Club. So if you haven't joined, it's time to join. Right, John? Okay. Okay, next, the Gatelli Conifer Collection. This is one of the most unique displays of horticulture at the Arboretum. In 1962, a conifer collector, William Gatelli, donated most of the plants from his estate in the Northeast. And he had one of the most extensive collections in the United States. This is the entrance into the Gatelli collection and a path going down through the Gatelli collection. The climate at the Arboretum allows these plants to grow conifers from the Arctic to the subtropical region, so we can get a little bit of everything in the way of the conifers there. It's always good to have some colored flowers, beds, when you've got the green conifers. This is a bald cypress that is there. John, you might recognize that. We had a lot of those down at Wood Lake, around our lake and our golf courses. Some fall colors in the conifer collection. A few more fall colors. These are very interesting and very unusual. These are redwoods. And the name of them is Metasequoia. It was thought that these were essentially extinct. Some seeds were found in one of our trips over to China and brought back and planted at the Arboretum, and they're doing their thing. It's probably the only ones within the United States now are there. In addition to the conifers, there is a great collection of crepe myrtles there. Let's take a look at some of those. The catawba. Of course, we got a lot of crepe myrtles around here at River Landing too, which are really beautiful. This is catawba, Seminole, Tuscarora, Miami, Sioux, as in the Sioux Indian tribes. A lot of these were developed by Dr. Don Egoff, who's a friend of mine there at the Arboretum. He really worked hard on crepe myrtles and had a tragic death in the early 90s, but he left so many beautiful things for the world. And Lipan. And even in the wintertime, that's Tuskegee, a crepe myrtle. I love the Gatelli collection in the wintertime. It was just so unusual and so beautiful and a great place to go over and walk through. And this is a juniper in the wintertime. Okay, next is the Boxwood Collection. When you think of boxwoods, or at least I do, the word that usually comes to mind, at least for me, is elegant. The National Arboretum's Boxwood Collection is one of the most complete collections of temperate-grown boxwood in the world, and there are over 180 species there. And the foliage colors can range from a blue-green to a lime green. Some of them are variegated foliage, splashes of yellow and cream. Some are little dwarfs, and some of them are like an exclamation point. And we've got some of those around here too. They're only about 2 or 3 feet wide, but they're almost 20 feet tall. Its evergreen nature and refined understanding growth habit make the boxwood the perfect plant for framing landscape and plantings of flowers. Remember, we saw some in the herb garden where you had some plantings like that. Everybody knows what they are? Daylilies, that's right. Lynn Batdorf was when I was there in the 80s, was the curator of the Boxwood Collection, and he also had the daylilies. And he just had hundreds and hundreds of the daylilies. They are all the different species. They were just absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Anybody got an idea what that is? It's a peony, and it's called Break of Day. Break of Day. And it's like a little cup. It's a beautiful little plant. And I really like this one too. That's another peony called lion tie. Lion tie. As I said, I spent a couple of years there. I wouldn't have been able to do it without a great deal of support, needless to say, from a couple of ladies. The one on the left is my lovely, elegant wife, who took some time off from her job where she was a contractor for the Navy. She's covering her face. Okay, don't do that, dear. And also my executive assistant when I was there, Christine Hambach. So those two ladies gave me a great deal of support there, and I appreciate that very much. See the way I worked that in there?
Who's the guy in the middle?
Good-looking guy, isn't he? Yeah. I know he got hair and everything. I don't know who he is. Okay, National Bonsai and Pinjing Museum. Got two more gardens to take a look at. The National Bonsai and the Pinjing Museum contains miniature masterpieces of horticultural art. And the Japanese word for this art is bonsai. The Chinese word is pinjing. And it's the use of woody plants in containers as a way to show the natural growth of plants in their natural landscape. I've got a few pictures of the interior of the museum there. This ended up being about a $2.5 or $3 million project at the Arboretum, and for the most part, that was done from outside donations, primarily through the National Bonsai Foundation. This is the entranceway. This is the Chinese gate into the Chinese pavilion. This is called the Japanese stroll garden. You would think of that as being Asian, wouldn't you? Nice and quiet and cool and calm. This is Cryptomeria walk. What's that wall look like? Yeah, Chinese dragon. You know, you can't have a Chinese festivity without some sort of a dragon involved. Bonsai require continual care and training. That's what they call it. When you're working with the bonsai, you are training that plant. And you train them to maintain their artistic design. And they need the usual watering and fertilization. Oh, I forgot about this one. Within the museum, there are a number of stones there, Asian stones. Primarily the Chinese would do these. They would take these beautiful stones, polish them, and then paint on them flowers. This is just one example of one of the things that they had there like that. This is a Trident maple forest. Now you're looking at that and saying, wow, that's a nice forest there. It's maybe 2.5, 3 feet tall, something like that. This art is based on miniaturization and creativity. And what is done is the branches are pruned, and then everything in the tree is shaped with wires. So they make the tree grow the way they want to do it. It's a living sculpture, is essentially what it is. A past president of the National Bonsai Foundation said that bonsai are intended to be beautiful in themselves and reflect the beauty of nature. The museum at the Arboretum began in 1976 with a gift of 53 bonsai trees from Japan's Nippon Bonsai Association, and that was done to commemorate the United States bicentennial when we became 200 years old. They were accepted by the United States by Henry Kissinger at the Arboretum. There are over 300 specimens on display, and there are 3 viewing areas, including the stones like I show you, and Japanese flower arrangements too. And I wish I had a picture of those. I don't. Does anybody know what Japanese flower arranging is called? Ikebana. Ikebana, and it's absolutely beautiful stuff. Google it sometime and look at some pictures of Ikebana. Okay. What do you think of when you, not the guy on the left, what do you think of when you look at that tree? It's called the wow tree, because most people, when they look at it, say, wow. Take a look at a couple of the more famous trees there. This is called the Yamake, Japanese white pine. And it's about 3.5 feet tall, maybe it's taller, 3.5, maybe 4 feet tall. And probably 2 or 3 of us together like this could get our arms around it. Look at the size of the trunk on that thing, quite thick. Anybody got any idea about how old that might be? 400. Close. What's the oldest residence that we've got here? Not 400.
Late 90s.
Late
98
90s.
and above. We have a
Okay,
couple of those.
Late 90s. Lee came close. This tree was started in training in 1625 by one family, a Japanese family. And the estate in that family was given as a gift to us in 1976. One other interesting thing about that particular tree, see how many history buffs we've got here. What happened 8:15 in the morning, August the 6th, 1945? Sam's got it. The United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. That tree was 2 miles from the epicenter of that blast, and it lasted. It made it through. Everybody has to see that when they go to the Bonsai Museum. Okay, let's take a look at some of the others. This was another famous one there. This is John Naka. One of the pavilions there in the museum is named for John. He's a famous bonsai guy from the United States. The name of his bonsai plant there is Goshen. And Goshen means protector of the spirit. And it is dedicated to his 11 grandchildren. And if you look at it real close, you can see 11 of those junipers in that bed. Okay, look at a few more of these. Oh, back to the Trident maple again. The year that one got started in training was 1985. This is a bougainvillea. Started in 1985. There's a buttonwood tree, 1975. It's a California juniper, 1967. You see a lot of junipers. I think they must be really interesting to work with. They have interesting looking trunks. We saw some crepe myrtles a little while ago. Here's one that started in 1930. It didn't weather very well, I don't think. This is a coastal redwood that started in 1954. It's probably a couple of feet tall. It's a Catlin elm, a little grove of elm trees, 1988. Here's a coastline oak tree. Here's a Chinese juniper, 1970. Nice little forest there. And I really like this. This is a grove of olive trees. That's a sweet gum tree. California juniper. I wake up some mornings and kind of feel like that. And really feel like that. And this one is particularly interesting, this California juniper. Whoever put this one together started back in 2006, and he was able to meld 2 different colored trunks together to work its way, and they are growing together. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention is the National Capitol columns. This really isn't a collection of flowers and flora as such, but it's certainly one of the more interesting things that is at the National Arboretum. So the question is, how did a bunch of Corinthian columns that were to hold up the Capitol dome end up at the National Arboretum? Well, these columns were originally sited for the east portico of the Capitol building, and they were quarried down in Aquia Creek, south of Washington, in 1828. And they were put on barges and sent up to Washington, D.C., and were set to hold the Capitol dome. Well, occasionally, as you might suspect, things go wrong in Washington, D.C. They were still building the dome, and the decision was to make the dome larger than was originally planned, and then they decided to also make it out of iron rather than what it was originally to be made out of, so all of a sudden, these babies couldn't hold up the dome. So they found a place for them still on the east side of the Capitol, but as it turned out, in 1958, there was a decision to redo the whole east portico of the Capitol building. So what are you going to do with these 24 Corinthian columns? Well, they ended up down on the Anacostia River, along the banks of the Anacostia River. And a lady by the name of Ethel Garrett, who loved the Arboretum and loved history and the Capitol building itself, decided she wanted to do something to preserve them. So she started a fund and a movement to get the Capitol columns moved to the National Arboretum. And that's what they look like. They were dedicated in 1990. There were originally 24 of them. Those of you who are math majors probably have already counted and see that there's only 22 of them up there. One of them was broken. So rather than put 23 up there, that would throw the whole symmetry off. So the other whole one and the half of one are up on top of Mount Hamilton. Now, the interesting thing about those columns, since they were there from 1828, the east side of the Capitol building is where all of the presidents were inaugurated from 1829 to 1958. So for a period of 130 years, almost all of the presidents were inaugurated there. 22 pounds, pretty good size. This is part of the steps and the flooring where the presidents were inaugurated for 130 years. So you've got people all the way back from Taylor all the way up through Eisenhower who probably walked on those steps, probably stood in that area up there where they are. You figured out, okay, how are they going to put these things up there and get them to stand by themselves? Because there's nothing really holding them up. So what they decided to do, the architects decided to do, was to go up inside of each one of the columns and core it out. So they went up about 15, 18 feet or so within each column, cored it out. This is one of the cores that came out one of those columns. And they put an iron bar about this size up inside of it like a rebar, and then fastened that rebar into the ground and the flooring up there of where the columns sit right now. So a lot of history there. And it was interesting, I went with Dr. Kathy when this thing got started, really got started about 1986, I guess I've been there about a year, about 1988, walking along the Anacostia River with him. He asked me one day, he said, "Hey, Wiz, you got galoshes?" Galoshes, yeah, I had some galoshes. So we went walking along the Anacostia and came across these things. Now, he knew that they were there. They were a real surprise for me. And he told me about what the plan was and so forth and what was going to be happening. And it took a couple of years before all of that got finished and got done. A couple more pictures of those. You can see them in the background. At dawn, in the fall, in the snow, it's the moon coming up over them. And the moon over it. Okay, that's what I've got, folks. I would invite you to come up. There's plenty of brochures up here of the Arboretum and some of the gardens that I talked about. There's an excellent book here on the plantings that are at the Arboretum, and you're welcome to borrow that if you like. A couple of you have already borrowed that book from me. If you're thinking about something that you might want to do in your own garden, at your cottages and so forth, this is really an excellent book and tells you how to go about making a good selection for whatever you want to do in your garden. And feel free to come up here and rub the steps where the presidents, you know, President Polk may have walked on this thing. You never know. I want to thank Brian very much for putting this together. I never would have done it without him because I'm not very techie at all. So thank you very much for doing that, Brian. Anybody have any questions, as long as they are non-scientific questions? Bill? No, I did not take those pictures. I went to the current director of the Arboretum, Dr. Olson, and told him what I had planned to do. He turned me over to 3 of the people on his staff there, and the chief botanist there, Stephen and Laura, went through their literally hundreds of thousands of pictures that they've got. And I told him what I was looking for, and he picked some out and sent them to me. And I brought Brian over, and I said, "Okay, Brian, here's what I'd like to do." And he said, "No problem, I can take care of that for you." And he did. So, yes, Carol? No, they don't have any cuttings that they sell there, but what happens is a lot of the organizations, and Ann Burke was reminding me of this today, a lot of the organizations like the Herb Society and the people who work in Fern Valley and some of those places, they have plant sales every year. So you can go there and get stuff, may not be exact cuttings from the Arboretum itself, but yes, they have a lot of plant sales there. Yes, Jim?
Do they have, are there facilities there for the public or whoever to have things like weddings or parties or whatever?
Glad you asked that question. Yes, and this just happened not too many years ago. It wasn't going on when I was there, but you can rent out the Capitol columns to get, wedding pictures done there. As a matter of fact, Dan Quayle, anybody remember Dan Quayle? He had his his official Christmas card picture taken at the Capitol columns. I'm sure you treasure your Christmas card just like I do that I got from Dan Quayle. Yeah, so they do that at weddings, and also if you have a permit as a professional photographer, you can go in and take pictures there too. Almost everybody that goes to the Arboretum has got a camera. It's amazing. Or binoculars. And the first people at the door, and I meant to mention this, when it opens at 8 o'clock, and it's open every day except Christmas Day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the first people there are the birders, John. They're always there first thing coming in the door. Yes, ma'am. Who determines what's planted there? Well, It's primarily a scientific organization. So what they are doing is trying to improve existing plants and so forth by doing various and sundry things to them. And each one of them has its own garden. So the scientists will work with the curator of that particular garden, and they decide what goes in there. But essentially everything that is there is being worked on from a scientific standpoint also to improve it. Anything else? Thank you all very much. I know it's a beautiful day outside. Appreciate you coming.